Let this be the moment now.
With every step I take.
With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. Take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally.
And let it begin. Yes, that's right. It is possible. It is possible.
I don't know about y'all, but I was feeling pretty restless listening to some of those songs. Anybody else? Feeling a little antsy in their seat? Like, what are we doing sitting here singing about peace? Because sometimes, it just does not feel like peace is possible at all. At all. At all. One member, one of you told me recently, just this past week, actually, Barbara, summer of peace? What were y'all thinking? It's more like a summer of plagues. And I started thinking about why it feels that way. We had first plague, rain, that wouldn't go away. And then second plague, these COVID infections that just won't quit, that we're getting accustomed to living with. And then third plague, you read about more wildfires. Right now, wildfires in New Mexico. And then, of course, fourth and fifth plagues, a school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. And then a mass shooting here in Tulsa. You might be able to persuade me that we are in a summer of plagues, not in a summer of peace. Only the United States sees mass shootings so frequent that at least 38 more have occurred since the Uvalde shooting, according to the Gun Violence Archive, which I learned reading an article in the New York Times on Friday by Rachel Louise Snyder entitled, "We Need Hope to Combat Violence That Won't Arrive Without Action." Action, yes, that's something to hold on to, a summer of action. Doesn't that sound better? Summer of action, I, for one, agree. I am much more experienced at taking action than at practicing peace. Somehow, my impassioned purpose soothes or even helps submerge the pain I feel. I can even enjoy the fight and that feeling that they're wrong and we're right. Salvation by works and not by faith is how I was raised in my humanist UU adjacent household. Peace? Peace? Impossible. Consider human nature. And so unimpressed by Jesus' supernatural ability to stop the storm, for years I wondered how on earth he would or could, for that matter, sleep through a life-threatening storm. How irresponsible of him, I thought. Do something. Don't just let us sink and die. How can you be sleeping when our very lives are at risk? Strangely, this week I imagine this is precisely what many of us would like to shout to many of our senators and representatives and state and local leaders right now. Wake up! Don't sleep through the end of the world. As we know it, do something. Our children are dying because of your inaction. People did get out into the streets over the weekend. Maybe you were among them to say pretty much that. Wake up. Do something. Well, I know a little girl named Amelia, and she did something this past week. She wrote something. Amelia and her parents are members here at All Souls. Amelia wrote a song, and she gave me permission to share it with you this morning. I will speak the words as they're projected on the wall. I will not sing the song. These are the words Amelia wrote. It's not the end of the world. Not quite yet. Do the winds still blow? Do the ocean still waves? Do we still stand on our land? It's not the end of the world, not quite yet. I know it feels like it. Just keep marching through the hot, boiling springs and the cold, freezing winters. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. It's not the end. Not the end. Not the end. Not the end of the world. Amelia is 9 years old. Knowing that more and more children are worrying about violence in places where they once felt safe, like in our schools. I turned this week to the teachings of Thich Nhat Hanh for more answers to that question, is peace possible? For more answers than the ones I grew up with, no. Consider human nature. Thich Nhat Hanh is one of the great teachers of Buddhism in the West and the author of many books, including Being Peace, Love in Action, Living Buddha, Living Christ, and Going Home, Jesus and Buddha as Brothers. Born in Vietnam in the 1920s, Thich Nhat Hanh became a monk at age 16. And when war came to his country, he and many other monks left their monasteries and actively engaged in helping victims of war while also communicating their desire for peace. In those years, Thich Nhat Hanh met with many world leaders, including the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Pope Paul VI, Thomas Merton, and then Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara. I've heard Thich Nhat Hanh described as a cross between a cloud, a snail, and a heavy piece of machinery. A true religious presence. Thich Nhat Hanh tells a story about how in 1976, he got involved trying to rescue boat people in the Gulf of Siam. The project was called When Blood is Shed, We All Suffer. At the time, not many people knew that refugees from Vietnam were being refused entry into countries like Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore, and that people in these small boats were dying in the sea. Secretly, people organized and hired ships, large and small, to transport water, food, and medicine to the people, hoping to transport them to Australia and Guam and France, bringing awareness to the rest of the world of these people's plight. The boat people, you might remember them being called. From time to time, we saw things you cannot believe. Thich Nhat Hanh writes, 60 people had just destroyed their boat so that the Malaysian police would not send them back out to sea. But the police were repairing their boat in order to do just that. The 60 people on this boat had just witnessed the deaths of everyone on another boat that had just capsized. The women and children could not stop crying. The men were just staring into empty space. When their project was exposed, thanks to media coverage, the police came to people's homes, including Thich Nhat Hanh's, to stop the rescue mission. At that time of night, Hanh writes, no one would answer the phone calls. Even the French embassy was closed. So, all of us practiced walking meditation inside our small flat for the rest of the night. If you practice conscious breathing before some difficulty arises, you will be prepared. Thich Nhat Hanh tried to get permission to entering a neighboring country in order to continue the rescue operation, but was denied a visa by everyone. He continues, there were more problems than seemed possible to solve in just 24 hours. So, I decided to practice the meditation topic, if you want peace, peace is with you immediately. I was surprised to find myself quite calm, not afraid or worried about anything. I was not just being careless, this was truly a peaceful state of mind, and in that state, I was able to overcome this difficult situation. The idea came to me to ask the French embassy to intervene on my behalf, and at 5 minutes to noon, just when offices would close and I would have to leave the country, an extension was granted. As long as I live, I will never forget those seconds of sitting meditation, those breaths, those mindful steps during that night and that morning. Success came when I faced the problem directly. I vowed that if I could not have peace at that moment, I would never be able to have peace. If I could not be peaceful in the midst of danger, the kind of peace I might realize in easier times would not mean anything. Practicing the topic, if you want peace, peace is with you immediately, I was able to resolve many problems, one after another. This is why we've chosen a summer of peace as our overarching theme this summer, and why we're focusing on one of our peace practices each month, starting with inclusion as we celebrate Pride Month together in June, continuing with respect as we celebrate, honor, and work to protect and strengthen our democracy in July, and finishing the summer with kindness in August when our children return to regular school and Sunday school. We can all be grateful to Shannon Boston for introducing these peace practices to our community here at All Souls. I'm grateful because those two words, peace plus practice, remind me that peace is not a permanent state I will attain or ever remain in, but instead that peace is a constant presence I can enter into. Peace isn't just possible, it's an imperative today. Learning how to cultivate peace, to plant seeds of peace, to practice peace is so necessary now because anyone can buy a gun, apparently. Am I right? Anyone can shoot a gun and kill people. That has become perfectly clear. But who do you know who knows how to make peace? Who do you know who knows how to create peace? I don't think Shannon knew about the work of psychiatrist Dr. Gilligan before this week, but in books like Violence, Reflections on a National Epidemic, Gilligan's theories affirm our peace practices. Dr. Gilligan is a clinical professor of psychiatry in the School of Medicine at NYU and an adjunct professor in the School of Law, and he's worked for decades with the most violent people our society produces in prisons and in prison mental hospitals. He concluded that violence is always, he uses that word always, a desperate and risky attempt to gain respect, attention, and recognition for oneself or the group with which one identifies. His theory is interesting for many reasons, including that it explains a whole range of violent behaviors, from individual acts of homicide and suicide to collective acts of violence like war and terrorism and genocide. All violence is an attempt to replace shame with self-esteem, he writes. What tragedy teaches and morality plays miss is that violence is an attempt to achieve justice, or what the violent person perceives as justice for themselves or for whomever it is on whose behalf they're being violent. Practicing peace, then, isn't passive or inactive. Not at all. It means we practice feeling at all the pain and the impotence and still find ways to choose to be inclusive, respectful, and kind. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is conflict well managed. And there's something happening in Texas this week, that's a great example. The famous Van Cliburn competition, piano competition, is taking place at Texas Christian university, while Wimbledon has said it would not allow players from Russia or Belarus to play this summer, and FIFA Soccer's international governing body has kicked out all Russian teams from global competition, the director of the Van Cliburn competition decided to include not only one Ukrainian, but 6 Russian pianists and 2 pianists from Belarus. He's gotten into some hot water for making that choice. He has warned competitors that they can't make any political statements in support of Putin. But because this man, Marquis, is taking the risk to include Russian pianists, we're invited to see and feel their full humanity. Ilya Schmuckler, 27, said that at times he feels guilty about the invasion. The key words for me, he said, are shame and responsibility. Denis Linik, 26, a pianist from Belarus, said he considered withdrawing from the competition because it didn't feel right to compete. And the fact that you're Russian doesn't mean you're a bad person, said Sergei Tanin, a pianist from Siberia who added that he had lost engagements and invitations to competitions since the start of the war. I don't think sanctioning a young pianist who is 22 years old will have an effect on the Russian government, said Jacques Marquis, the president and CEO. That will only play into Putin's handbook if we isolate the Russian people. Inclusion, respect, and kindness are all words that require courage and intention. They are not passive at all. Nonviolence does not mean an absence of action. When I was a child, I learned that people were violent and capable of doing the very worst things. I didn't learn until later in life that we can also learn and choose to be nonviolent. On this Sunday morning, I want Amelia, who wrote that song, to know that. I want her to see that we're awake. I want her to know that someone sees she's afraid and that we are not sleeping through the storm, even if we are practicing peace. I want our practices of inclusion and respect and kindness to calm the raging waters in our communities today. I really think that when Jesus was in that boat, staying calm and being still, he was showing the disciples yet again that there's another way, a way different from being consumed by our fear and our anger, our shame, and our violence. Now, I want to teach Jo Henry, my granddaughter, to practice peace for her own well-being, which means I'm going to have to start with myself. It's true for all these practices. As a young woman, I wanted most of all to bring peace into places full of conflict, but I didn't know the work started within. And I want my granddaughter to have a community like this one where people will teach her how to hold her ground and stay true to her values, no matter what storms are raging around her. So when I see Jo Henry at the end of August, I want to start teaching her our song. When I breathe in peace. And when I breathe out love. It's not just a song. Practicing nonviolence takes great effort and great strength, and it requires restraint and resilience. Mahatma Gandhi called it satyagraha, or soul force. And of course, sometimes inaction, just sitting and breathing, can be harmful, and silence can be violence. We saw that dramatically unfold in Uvalde. But being nonviolent, the way I'm talking about it, does not mean being inactive or passive. To the contrary, practicing peace this way means transforming the pain we feel for a purpose so we actually can be the change we want to see in the world. Thich Nhat Hanh says, if you want peace, peace is with you immediately. Yes. Shall we try it?
When I breathe in, I breathe in.
teach our children peace practices in this community for a purpose. Because once peace is alive in you, you can really pass it to other people. Just the way our anxiety is contagious, our peace is contagious too. And in a day when no horror seems impossible, when the unimaginable is already here, this practice is so important because it's not the end of the world yet. Not yet. And we are a people waging peace, not war. We are a people befriending our feelings of fear and rage, of apathy and indifference, of hopelessness and helplessness. We are a people facing our problems directly. We are a people practicing inclusion, respect, and kindness for a purpose, because we know if we want peace, peace is not only possible, it is with us immediately. So I leave you with a question. What peace practice will you pick up this summer? Because peace is now an imperative. It is not only possible, it is an imperative. And so I'm calling you all aboard. All aboard. If you didn't have time to buy a ticket, I'm still inviting you. All aboard. We are on a peace train.
I've been happy lately, thinking about the good things to come. I believe it could be something good has been.